Whew. Always gotta stretch before lifting heavy things. The ROG Helios. It is finally here. So the Helios enclosure, there are many things to get excited about if you're a fan of ROG Strix products, and this being the first case in their entire lineup, I'm really hoping they're flexing hard to prove what their flagship case can deliver. It is massive and it is expensive, so here's my review of the $280 case made for the hardcore ROG fans. Hello, I'm looking for some fans. Well, are you married? Yeah, I have a ring. What is your favorite number? I would say 3. Do I have the perfect fan for you? This is the new Thermaltake Ring Trio 12 fans with good static pressure for radiators. It is a beautiful frame with double side and center ring illumination with soft and super bright spill with Razer Chroma compatibility. Control it through your smartphone, the RGB Plus software on the PC, or Amazon Alexa. Well, I'm gonna take these home. Perhaps you should too. Check them out in the description below. So let me start off this review with an interesting element that is the strap. It is part of the overall design and is also a carrying handle. It locks via Velcro on each end and can easily support the weight of a fully loaded system, so that's not an issue. And if you don't really like how the strap looks, it is easily removable, and there is some customization opportunity here with different designs that I hope we'll see in the future, something vibrant or game themed that in theory should not be expensive to implement. We have glass on 3 sides, so both sides panels are TG with a push to release mechanism that unlocks the panel, and it's safely angled at the bottom until you pull it out. This means both sides look super clean and helps to emphasize the brushed aluminum front and top sections. As for the front panel, here we have that side LED illumination to reveal the ROG logo up top, some line design schematic in the midsection, and the ROG text at the bottom. You can turn them off, cycle between different colors, or connect to an addressable header for motherboard control. Now, it's a bit too much for my taste personally. I like something a bit more simple, but I'm glad that the side panels don't follow the schematic, and the front glass, by the way, is properly spaced out. The I/O is quite rich with PR buttons, your audio jacks, 4 red USB 3 ports with 1 angled connector and 1 straight, a Type-C Gen 2 port, your LED button, plus 2 fan modes, as the Helios comes with the built-in fan controller in the top left and supports 6 3-pin fans. And so the case being so large, I think they've done a really good job with fan and radiator compatibility. Removing the top dust filter is easy with a simple pull, and further removing the strap may be needed if you're installing anything else up top. And that's because the bracket is lowered into the position from the top, simplifying your installation of anything heavy, like a 360 rad is supported, or a 280 or 11140mm fans. You can still slide the bracket underneath the strap if whatever you're installing has enough clearance. As for the front airflow intake, 3 fans are included plus 1 exhaust, and I appreciate the bracket for ease of installation, but they kind of messed up here with non-captive, non-magnetic and tiny thumb screws that make reinstalling this bracket actually more difficult than it needs to be. It's the same story with the rear PSU bracket, and I don't understand why the screws were not built into the frame. But on a positive note, radiator support is quite good with up to a 360 up top and 420 at the front. 2 more dust filters can be accessed from the front, removable from the top and the bottom. Nice and simple, covering that massive area that is the interior of the Helios. Your standard hardware might feel very lonely inside, which is why that cable bar adds some complexity to the vast emptiness otherwise, like the 2 GPU support arms that swivel and move along the tube for height adjustment, and that open section above to pass your 24-pin cable and others. Its position is also flexible, so moving it to the right opens up the spacing for routing cables, and once you're done, you can slide it back into the original position. I also quite like the PSU shroud design, again with some ROG themed text to cover an otherwise flat metal piece. The ventilation pattern above the PSU also follows the general design direction, and we have just under 3 inches of clearance from the front bracket for your cooling hardware. There's also an acrylic window into the PSU section, and that I don't understand. First of all, it is acrylic, so it will easily get scratched up after a few assembly procedures, and also if it was tempered glass, that would have been cool and match the whole premium aesthetic, or just it being removed completely and just leave the cutout alone. Why does it have to be covered with acrylic? Now, removing that front shroud reveals a drive cage with 2 caddies and 3 positions for the cage itself, and I'm personally okay not having any more caddies or 3.5-inch drive slots given the target audience, but it does limit its use case scenario. I don't like how you have to remove the entire shroud to install the power supply, and also how awkward the interior looks without anything covering the bottom section. And keep note here, there are no additional cutouts underneath the motherboard outside of whatever is in front of the power supply, so that means an odd stretch for that audio cable in particular. I was also quite surprised to find the vertical PCI slot bracket blocking access to most of your standard PCI slots, so that needs to be removed every time you pop something in or out of your motherboard. It's pretty annoying, and the riser cable is not even included, so by default you can't utilize these slots. As you can see with my reference configuration, less than half of that area is occupied, and that's just the nature of large enclosures like it. Here you can see the GPU support in action, and if needed, the tabs can be moved to the other tube for longer GPU support. A pump bracket is included with 2 positions on top of the shroud, but unfortunately there are no side mounting holes for reservoirs, for example, and the 4 mounting points you see on top of the cable cover is either for an SSD or the ROG or a terminal. Unfortunately, the 8-pin cutout above the motherboard is just too high that for sure will be difficult to access with any radiators installed up there, but more importantly, my cable is just not long enough to be routed on either side of the CPU cutout, so it looks off unless you use an extension. And by the way, on this side we have an acrylic swivel cover that is quite dark and will help to hide and collect any of your cables. Plus, this is where your primary storage should be located, with 4 SSD caddies, 2 of which can be relocated outside of the cover below the CPU cutout. And as for the cables, unfortunately this entire section is quite flat, but Velcro straps are your friend and there's a lot of room to work with. As for temperatures, CPU and GPU are pretty balanced, and the high profile looks like the triple fan intake covers that entire height of the case, which is probably why the GPU temperatures are so good, but the low speed profile definitely shows some struggle because of that glass panel. The fans are also pretty loud at the high setting, while at low it's a very quiet enclosure, but not having a PWM cable output from the fan controller is disappointing, as users don't have that full RPM control unless you replug all the fans directly into the motherboard or another fan controller. And at this price, if you're really loyal to the brand and want to match your hardware like an ROG motherboard or the Thor PSU or a Strix GPU, then the Helios kind of makes sense, and that's who this case is made for. But if you're really all about the size of the enclosure, cheaper alternatives do exist from Phanteks, Be Quiet, Thermaltake, and NZXT, so make sure to check those out before considering the Helios. Alright, so how do we conclude here? Honestly, it is not what I was expecting. I was hoping for a full-out flagship release case that has innovative ideas and cool new features that you would see trickle down into lower-tier future Strix enclosures, like the OLED screen we saw at CES. That would have been a fantastic addition to be included here by default, given the price point and the stature, and this being like the flagship release as their first case. Normally you'd launch something at a really high tier and moving into lower tier, slightly lower price points, less features, so it almost feels like this is kind of the middle of the pack in terms of feature design and that freshness that we would expect, and not that flagship status. I mean, not even including an 8-pin CPU extension, knowing how much that cable has to travel. The refinement element is just not there. And I feel like majority of people who gravitate towards big cases might find this to be too branded or too expensive, or both. And I'd love to hear what you think about the Helios in the comments. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I'm Dmitry. Make sure to check out this other relevant content. I'll talk to you in the next video.